Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Kerry Pollock. Alison McConnell is here as always, and this week we have Motherwell boss Paul Brownlie on the couch. Paul, thanks for joining us today.
No problem at all.
Before we get to the Motherwell stuff, 7 years at Celtic's Women's Academy, and then...
Spent 7 years at Celtic. It was kind of, the early stages of my coaching journey. Numerous different roles. Even going back to the very start when Celtic took over for Arsenal North. It was kind of integrated right at the start in terms of how we tried to develop the girls' system at Celtic. So, no, it was a long journey, and it doesn't feel like 7 years anyway. And
then you were headhunted by the SFA to become their head performance football manager. I'll just get a wee description here. Involved planning, coordinating, delivering and evaluating all aspects of the National Performance Centre's performance programme for 6 years.
Yeah, got a phone call from Alison. I was kind of working within the national system at that point with various age groups, just kind of more as an assistant coach, and I knew that Willie Kirk was making the move down south at that point. I think Willie went to Bristol and Anna had phoned to say, there's something I'd be interested in. I'm going to be honest, it was a difficult decision at that point because I was really happy and I felt really settled at Celtic at that point and we were doing a lot of good work. Numerous conversations with the powers that be at that point. It was Adrian Philby who was kind of in charge of the kind of girls and women's programme at that point. And then I decided to make the move. I think it was down to my heart. I'd been at Celtic the rest of my life, but I had to make a really mature decision at that point, and I did it, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. How
did you then come to Motherwell then? How did that come about?
Well, obviously, the COVID situation had hit, really hard, and hit different funding streams across, every kind of industry, and football was no different. And at that point, Harriet Watt was working in partnership with the Scottish FA, and different funding streams which were coming to an end. So I knew that I never had a lot of time left in the job. And then just at the day one day, out of the blue, I got a phone call from Alan Burrows, and he'd spoke about the opportunity to get into Motherwell, and it kind of grew through there. So that's me just under 3 years now being in post at the club.
Is anything surprised you about the job? Is it what you expected when you first went in?
I knew it would be intense. I knew the workload would be intense, but I've just tried to get in and just tried to put my spin on it for day dot. Interestingly, it was my kind of first step into management. I've always been a youth coach as well, so I felt at this stage in my journey it was probably the right time to go and test myself, and I wanted to go there and put my stamp on it early. And what I tried to do is, there was a kind of maybe a 3-4 week time frame where I knew I was getting a job and nobody else did, and it gave me an opportunity to go and assess the squad, assess the staff, and see what it needed, and also the direction I wanted to try and take it. And one of the biggest things I wanted to do was to make a real statement early, and that statement was Brownlie and Crichton on board with me.
Did you go in there with an idea in mind of what you wanted to do, what you wanted to achieve, or was it after you had assessed your players and the team, that sort of thing?
I think it was just an ongoing process, a very early, I wanted to, I speak about that statement when, that big statement early, and that was trying to bring Leanne on board as well, and I felt I needed a serial leader in there. Already obviously the club captain Jill Ingalls, who I kept really close, but I wanted a serial winner in the changing room. I'd loved what Scott Brown had went to Aberdeen to work with Stephen Glass and putting somebody like that in the changing room, and not to say that Leanne's the female version of Scott Brown, but I wanted to bring somebody who's been there and done it at the highest level, both domestically and internationally, and I know the change and the culture she bring the changing room was a lot of the changes that I wanted to try and implement as well. So bring Leanne there was a real statement of intent, and obviously the club captain at that point was Jill Ingalls, and I wanted to try and keep Jill really close in terms of what I was trying to build at that point. So and it became about the first team, but also Motherwell never had a youth system. So I wanted to very quickly try and implement a youth system in there, as so we had that conveyor belt of players that would come through, and ultimately that was a big part of the strategy for myself moving forward.
How helpful has that been, having that structure there with the youth system and then coming up to the first women's team?
It's been really successful in a short time frame. We're just under 2 years now we've had the system up and running, and in order to get there it was difficult because yourselves in Scotland, especially at youth level, there's not that critical mass of players. And there was other systems, like Celtic, Rangers, Hamilton, really local to us who were really well established. So it was about trying to identify the right sort of quality to bring in, and I think we've done really well in a really short time frame. How we've tried to implement all the right procedures, the protocols, have a good technical and tactical programme which would allow our young kids to develop. And I take real pride in how far we've came in a really short time frame.
How big a challenge was that, obviously, because you spent time at Celtic and we're speaking earlier, you said it was already very established then, to then come into Motherwell where you had to build it from the bare bones, basically?
Yeah, it was from scratch, completely from scratch, and we had to go through a recruitment process as well, which was difficult. Trying to identify coaches as well to come in and you know, people I knew and people I trusted who would come in and help me to get this off and running, and you know, it was very, very difficult, you know, early stages, and you know, I'd looked at what had happened in the past at Motherwell, and there was a youth system, wasn't fully integrated within the football club as well. So there was a local club, Lanarkshire Hibs. I then reached out to the person in charge of the name at that point, Debbie Horn. I had to try and be creative and how I had to try and recruit the players. And Debbie agreed that they would come over to Motherwell as well. And it was a completely clean slate. I appreciate that Lanarkshire Hibs at that point had been Motherwell and then moved over to Lanarkshire, so we were then trying to bring them back. Which then allowed us to, you know, then create the teams and then move it forward, and then it was about how we add quality to it as well.
Just on the team then, how happy are you with where they are at the moment? Are you hoping they can climb the table that bit further before we get to the split, especially?
Yeah, it's been a big challenge this season. It's myself personally and Leanne, it's been a challenge in terms of results. It's probably been a lot more inconsistent than what it's been the last couple of years, but that, you know, that's a challenge for us as young coaches and young managers. So no, listen, I've still got a real trust in the squad and the players that are there. We've got good quality. Some games I really believe we've not had the luck we've deserved at some points. And one of the biggest things is obviously been that lack of penetration, you know, in terms of taking our opportunities. And when I look at some of the games recently as well, against, you know, Celtic with big moments in the game, we never took them. Again, Glasgow City, big moments. The Hamilton game as well, big moments. So there's a theme there, but you know, certainly behind the scenes, I know how hard the players are working, I know how hard the coaches are working to try and rectify it.
Do you think there's a little bit of a fear factor there when you come up against the top three?
Listen, it's something that I looked at early, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I think, you know, certainly the early stages, I'd worked really close with a guy called Donald McNaughton, who's a kind of mind coach, if you like, and identified that, you know, in these games, the players, even before they left the changing rooms, and they looked at a badge, and you know, I always felt they were already beat before they hit the pitch, and we tried to work really, really hard with the players and how we developed their mindset in these games as well, last season especially. And I think we've seen the fruits of that with the game against Celtic. We managed to get a draw 0-0. Even against Glasgow City, we took them to like 96 minutes, 97 minutes and 52 seconds to be precise, because the referee told me he was adding 6 minutes, so we're a minute and 52 seconds over. So, you know, we'd seen real progress in these games as well, and I told the players, you know, body language for me is everything. You know, even in the tunnel, looking forward, they have got to have a trust and a belief in terms of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. And I'm sure that's something that all the coaches talk to their players about, you know, across the league when it comes to these games, that I think there has to be, you know, it's a challenge for us, both tactically and technically, and you know, how we analyse, how we prepare our players for these games. But when you look at the success recently, you know, the gap is, you know, we're trying to make the gap closer, and that's a big challenge for us. That's
interesting, Alison, because we spoke about that point before on the show, maybe being a bit of a fear factor there, especially when you come up against, our example was Glasgow City at the time.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about it often, that you almost have 3 leagues within the top league, like the way the structure is played out, and the way I think it's probably reflective of resources too. Where teams are, I think maybe Partick Thistle might buck that trend a bit in terms of punching above their weight. But I think essentially teams are placed almost where you would expect them to be based on what resources that they do have. And I think there is a huge chasm between top and bottom. I think there's such a substantial gulf there between teams at the bottom end and teams at the top. That's not to say that you can't have an isolated result at one game that you go up against that you can't take a draw or whatever, as you guys have done. But I do think across the course of the campaign, it plays out, that's reflected in the quality and resources that you have available. And I suppose a challenge, not just for individual teams, but for the league as a whole, is to try and make that a more cohesive campaign, make it tighter across the league as a whole. And I think that comes by raising the profile of the league, by raising the resources that's available to the league. All things that are easy to talk about, but a bit harder to actually implement in reality.
You've come up against the top 3 more than once now, Paul. Who's your favourites to win the title?
It's a tough one. I think there's quality across the board in the 3 of them, and I just look at the work that obviously Glasgow City have done with Fiona Brown, somebody I know really well. And watching Fiona against us, you know, a couple of Sundays ago, I thought she was magnificent. I think she could be a real game changer for Glasgow City. But it's going to be interesting. I think the heads to heads, you know, will probably define it. I think if I had to pick one out of 3 right now, I'd probably said Rangers, but certainly I know they've lost obviously Kirsty McLean, which is a huge loss for, you know, not just Rangers but for us as a nation as well, because she's a top player. But if I had to say one of them just now, I'd probably say I think Rangers are in the driving seat.
Yeah, well, we're discussing Celtic earlier as well, and we've obviously discussed it on the show as well. The players, Lena Suduka has come in, she's described how she wants her teams to play, but the players have reverted back to their old ways. How would you have reacted to that as a manager if you had come in?
I think it's a difficult one. I think Fran had maybe a certain style which the players trusted, and you know, there was that level of fluency when you played against Celtic at times. Like you're trying to work at the patterns they're trying to play, and there was just that level of creativity, and I think a lot of that came obviously for the players, and obviously Fran's style maybe a wee bit different just now. Lena will maybe take a bit of time to implement her style and obviously her game model which she wants to try to implement. I think they've got the quality to get there, Celtic. I don't think they'll be far away. I was quite surprised she said make the change in terms of, you know, reverted to a 4 against Rangers and a 4 against City, then changed it back for Hamilton and changed it back for herself. So maybe it's something that she's identified, you know, when she analysed her team. It's maybe the changes that maybe her and her staff wanted to make, and, you know, maybe try to get the best out of the profile of the player in terms of the position where they play. So I'm not really too sure why she changed it, but, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Celtic moving forward.
Do you think it'll be a closer end as we get closer to the final stages, Alison, that they'll cut the gaps to maybe two?
I think the split has a potential for that, because obviously you have the top 6 then playing against one another. I think there's greater scope for teams to drop points. I have to agree with Paul. I think for me Rangers are still in the driving seat. I think it'll be interesting to see just how they react. A bit of a wobble by their own standards, I suppose you could say. Just obviously the draw against Celtic and the draw that had come before that too. But I do think they have the quality to go and kick on. Rachel Rowe, for me, I think, has probably been the best player in the league so far this season. I think she's been excellent. Just so fundamental to how Rangers play, and the kind of menace that they carry, and the fact that they've got goals in Jane Ross and Rio Hardy too. I think they're very difficult to beat. I would say I thought Celtic were much better at Ibrox last Sunday. I thought it seemed night and day from that game that they played against Rangers in the Cup, the Sky Sports semi-final Cup game, in Elena's first game in charge. I think they looked far more cohesive, they looked a better unit, they looked far... they didn't look as disjointed as they did that night, and I think with a bit of luck actually they might have got the win at Ibrox. Some big moments in that game, that Natasha Flint one, if she'd taken it to make it 2-0, which really would have made things interesting. But certainly I think it'll be an interesting finale. I don't know that it'll be quite as tight as what it was last term. I would hope so, because I think it really created a huge amount of interest in the Women's League that we hadn't seen before. I think it really shone a spotlight on it in a way that we've not had before, and I think you need it to be competitive to sustain that interest. I think if you've got one team running away with it, it becomes overlooked in a way that it's not when it's very live.
What have you made of Jo Potter's impact since she's come into Rangers, Paul?
Yeah, I've been really impressed. I think, you know, there is a real opportunity for Rangers to try and win a treble. It's on for them as well, and I think they've got the quality, and I think they've got the strength and depth to do it as well. I'm sure Brian Graham will have something to say about that in a couple of weeks' time, right enough, in the Cup final. And yeah, but no, listen, I'll look at the strength they've got, and, you know, City will enjoy this as well. City will enjoy this run-in. I think, you know, they've got the quality to go toe-to-toe right to the end here, and I think, listen, I know Fran was really successful with Celtic, but the Holy Grail has always been, you know, the league championship is something that Celtic have not done there, so not won yet. So I still think there'll be a real drive at that end to take this to the wire. I don't think it'll go as close as, I agree with Alison, I don't think it'll go as close, but there's going to be some tasty games in there.
Yeah, definitely. We talk about the Old Firm a lot, but as we've said before, Alison, don't count City out, because they've got that experience, they've done it for years. Like, won titles back to back. They've got that within the squad to just stay calm and just take game by game.
Yeah, and they're back level on points now with Celtic too. They've clawed that back about 4 points at the top of the league. I think, yeah, anything could happen. I think so much will come down to the games between the top 3, because obviously if someone's taking points off of another team, then you've got a free team there able to make up the slack. And I think too, everyone of course wants to go and win their league and challenge for the title, but I think second place is important too, because obviously it has access to Champions League and the potential to go and secure a European spot. So I think that is there's still a real vying. Whoever's not going to win the league out the top 3, then there's a real fight for that second spot.
Well, let's just have a look at the games coming up at the weekends. We've got Glasgow City against Aberdeen, Spartans face Motherwell, Celtic will host Partick Thistle, Dundee United take on Hearts, Montrose against Hamilton, and Hibernian will face Rangers. How are the girls feeling ahead of this one, Paul?
Yeah, looking forward to it. I had them in Sunday. I was trying to keep them ticking over. They're back in again tonight, so we know Sunday's a huge game for us. Spartans are kind of breathing down our neck. They're 3 points behind us. Still a wee gap there in terms of goal difference, but you know, when I look at some of the performances recently, I know it's coming. We're not safe yet. You know, we understand and also respect the teams who are underneath us, and we know everybody's fighting for their lives. So now Aberdeen have got a wee gap on the rest of us, but you know, I'm sure even looking at the fixtures this weekend, there's some tasty games in there at the bottom as well. And there's teams who are starting to pick up a bit of, you know, Hamilton are starting to motor a wee bit just now. They've picked up, you know, some massive points as well, and that'll be an interesting game on Sunday against Montrose.
How do you use this time, this international break that we've just had to, do you reassess, do you reset, do you look at the team? How do you use this time?
Yeah, obviously, you know, we've had 3 away and, 2 away. Young Sophia Martin had to pull out. The under-19s national squad with an injury. Laura Berry and Kayla Jardine were both away in the 19s and both done really, really well across the 2 games. Laura Berry scores 4 goals. Kayla Jardine get 1 goal in the game on Friday against Wales. So the 2 of them will come back in flying. Laura Berry's just joined us for Rangers as well, and she's made a real impact in a really short time frame. We know that we've kept the players ticking over. You know, we're back in tonight. We'll get an analysis done ahead of the weekend. I thought I'd be giving them a bit of time off during the international break, but I never. So the players were delighted with that. But no, listen, it's, you know, it's important that we keep bringing the energy and keep bringing the drive to make sure we can get out of, you know, where we're sitting just now in the league. Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to the end of the Women's Show for this week. Thanks to Paul for joining us. We'll be back next week with some more action to look forward to.